What if I told you a car once ran for 10 years without stopping? No refueling, no recharging, not even a moment's pause. An experiment so bold, so controversial, that it vanished into obscurity, buried beneath scientific politics, corporate panic, and one man's relentless pursuit of an impossible idea. This is the untold story of Maxwell's car, a decade-long test that challenged the laws of energy, sparked rumors of perpetual motion, and left behind a trail of mystery that scientists still debate today. While most people remember him for his equations on electromagnetism, few know about his obsession with energy flow. Specifically, the idea that under the right conditions, energy could be manipulated, redirected, maybe even recycled. But Maxwell had a problem. His theories stayed on paper. Dr. Elias Maxwell presented a design unlike anything the automotive world had ever seen. A system that captured heat, vibration, magnetic drift, and even ambient electromagnetic noise, and fed it back into the vehicle's power core. Critics mocked it as fantasy. Scientists called it impossible, but Elias called it Maxwell's loop. Some believe corporate sponsors realize the implications. A car that never stops threatens trillion-dollar industries. Others whisper that researchers found something in the data, something they weren't ready to share. The project was sealed. The car disappeared. And Dr. Maxwell never spoke publicly again. Years later, a handful of leaked documents emerged. The engine exhibited net zero energy loss. Heat-to-electric reconversion reached never-before-recorded efficiency. And, most shocking, the longer the car ran, the more stable and efficient it became. Was it perpetual motion? Not exactly. But it was the closest humanity had ever come. The test proved something extraordinary. Under the right design, a machine could operate for a decade with no external fuel, and maybe even longer. So why isn't Maxwell's car in museums? Why aren't auto companies replicating the design? A car that doesn't need fuel, doesn't need charging, doesn't need anything at all. As discussions about Maxwell's car faded from public view, the mystery quietly settled into the background of scientific folklore. Yet behind the scenes, the legacy of the experiment continued to whisper its influence. Former technicians who had worked on the decade-long test spoke of data logs that behaved unlike anything they had encountered. The car's internal system, rather than degrading over time, demonstrated a remarkable tendency toward equilibrium, almost as if the machine adapted to its own energy environment. Some described the engine's rhythm as steady and calm, the kind of mechanical consistency that gave the impression of a system learning to sustain itself. Though the official files were sealed, those who had seen even small fragments of the research remained convinced that Dr. Elias Maxwell had uncovered a principle far more delicate and profound than conventional engineering could easily explain. For years after the shutdown, quiet inquiries appeared in academic circles. A handful of researchers, often working independently, attempted to reconstruct a mathematical framework that might support Maxwell's loop. They approached the problem from perspectives ranging from thermodynamics to electromagnetism, and from advanced materials science to simulations of energy feedback. Yet none could replicate the stability observed in the original prototype. This led some to believe that the secret did not lie solely in the blueprint, but in a subtle combination of physical design, environmental conditions, and the precise harmony of components that Maxwell had assembled. It was as though the machine had operated on a narrow ridge between what was possible and what was merely theoretical. The idea fascinated those who pursued it quietly in laboratories and private workshops, hoping to rediscover the serene balance that had allowed the car to glide forward for a full decade without pause. Meanwhile, Dr. Maxwell himself retreated from public life. He continued to teach and advise young researchers, but rarely spoke of the experiment except to say that innovation often requires patience and humility. In private, however, he was said to carry shelves of notebooks filled with diagrams, refinements, and contemplations about energy behavior, notes that suggested he had not abandoned the concept, but was instead studying it from an even broader perspective. Some colleagues believe that Maxwell came to view the car not simply as an engineering achievement, but as a demonstration of a deeper principle, that systems designed with balance at their core may evolve toward stability when allowed to operate freely over time. This belief inspired him to explore the continuity between mechanical systems, natural ecosystems, and the subtle relationships that govern all forms of energy exchange. In the absence of public records, the story of a 10-year test evolved into a quiet legend. It spread through universities, engineering communities, and the curious corners of the internet where enthusiasts gathered to discuss unexplained technologies. Many of these groups treated Maxwell's car not as a claim of perpetual motion, but as a symbol of what might be possible when innovation steps beyond conventional limits. Artists painted illustrations of the serene gray sedan, circling an empty track under soft lights. Writers imagined the thoughts of the lone researchers who kept vigil over the car as it moved day after day, year after year. The more the story was shared, the more it took on a tone of reverence, not for mystery alone, but for the persistence and imagination that made the experiment possible. Yet the most intriguing part of the story came years later, when a quiet surge of interest emerged among modern engineers. Advances in material science, quantum efficiency, and energy harvesting had begun to resemble ideas that Maxwell once explored. Technologies that once seemed distant were suddenly entering practical reality. Researchers studying vibrational energy capture discovered that long-term mechanical motion could produce increasingly stable energy states. Specialists in electromagnetic feedback found that small fluctuations in electric fields could accumulate into measurable power. Even those working in battery-less sensor networks began to recognize patterns that faintly echoed the theories Maxwell had explored decades earlier. It was as though the scientific world was slowly catching up to a vision that had once been considered far beyond reach. Now, the story stands in a remarkable place. Maxwell's car is no longer just an experiment hidden in sealed archives. It has become a quiet inspiration for a new generation of thinkers. They see in the old tale a reminder that progress is not always linear, and that sometimes a single bold idea can open pathways that remain invisible until the world grows ready to understand them. Whether or not the original prototype will ever be revealed again, the principles that guided it continue to influence ideas about sustainable design, self-sustaining systems, and the delicate balance between technology and the natural flow of energy. And so the journey of the car does not truly end. It continues in the minds of those who believe that innovation, approached with curiosity and care, can illuminate possibilities that once seemed unreachable. As interest in Maxwell's theories quietly reawakened within modern laboratories, a growing sense of anticipation began to thread through the scientific community. Early pages were filled with equations and diagrams outlining the mechanical principles of the loop. But as the years progressed, his notes took on a more reflective quality. He wrote about patterns found in rivers, the graceful arcs of celestial bodies, and the natural tendency of ecosystems to find equilibrium when left undisturbed. It became clear that he was no longer thinking solely about engines, but about the broader principle of continuity itself. To him, the car was not the end of a journey, but the beginning of a deeper understanding of how energy, motion, and balance could be interwoven into a single coherent idea. Those who read his later reflections felt as though they were glimpsing a mind trying to translate the quiet wisdom of nature into a mechanical language. This growing interest eventually led to a moment of renewed discovery. A small team of researchers succeeded in locating a storage vault within an old industrial complex connected to Maxwell's former team. Inside, they found a number of sealed containers, each carefully labeled but untouched for many years. Among the files were maintenance logs, sensor readings, environmental charts, and several notebooks believed to have been used during the final years of the test. The documents were remarkably well preserved, offering insights into the car's final days. The logs revealed that the vehicle's performance had not declined toward the end. In fact, the data suggested that the system had reached a gentle plateau of stability, sustaining itself with quiet elegance. This discovery encouraged researchers to believe that the experiment ended not due to failure, but because its purpose had already been fulfilled. The existence of the vault itself became a symbol of calm reassurance, evidence that Maxwell had left behind more than a story. He had left a foundation for future exploration. As scientists and engineers began analyzing these rediscovered materials, their discussions took on a renewed sense of purpose. They spoke not just about recreating the original machine, but about understanding the principles that guided it, principles that might influence future forms of energy-efficient transportation, sustainable architecture, and long-lasting mechanical systems. The thought that technology could operate harmoniously, without strain or depletion, filled their discussions with quiet optimism. This gentle optimism spread through academic communities, inspiring new research initiatives and encouraging young engineers to think beyond traditional boundaries. And in this way, the story of Maxwell's car continued to grow, not as a closed chapter, but as an unfolding journey, one that invited each new mind to contribute, explore, and imagine the possibilities that arise when innovation is guided by balance, patience, and curiosity rather than urgency alone. As the rediscovered materials were studied with growing admiration, a quiet realization began to settle across the scientific world. The legacy of Maxwell's car was not found solely in the mechanics of the vehicle, nor in the decade-long journey it completed upon its circular path, but in the spirit of discovery that it awakened. Researchers who engaged with the newly uncovered documents often spoke of the clarity and calmness contained within them. They admired not only the precision of Dr. Elias Maxwell's work, but the peaceful confidence with which he approached each question. His logs revealed no urgency, no racing ambition, only a steady belief that understanding would arrive through patience and thoughtful observation. This tone resonated deeply with those who reviewed his writings, reminding them that meaningful breakthroughs often emerge from a quiet willingness to explore without expectation. Months passed as teams carefully assembled all available information, piecing together the full story of the experiment from beginning to end. Eventually, a clear narrative emerged. The car had been built not to defy the laws of nature, but to work with them. Its purpose had never been to astonish or disrupt, but to demonstrate a harmonious relationship between design and environment. When the experiment concluded after 10 years, it was not due to exhaustion or decline, but because the system had proven its point with gentle certainty. Maxwell and his colleagues understood that the test had reached completeness, and they chose to preserve its findings rather than continue endlessly. This decision reflected their belief that some achievements are most powerful when they remain simple and unembellished, without being pushed beyond their natural conclusion. In time, a public foundation was established to share Maxwell's principles with students, researchers, and creators from various fields. The foundation did not present the car as a miracle or a mystery, but as a thoughtful example of what becomes possible when innovation is approached with balance and respect for the underlying patterns of the world. It encouraged new generations to study energy not as something to be consumed, but as something to be guided and harmonized. Exhibits showcase reconstructed models of the original design, early sketches from Maxwell's notebooks, and digital simulations illustrating the graceful stability of the system. Visitors often spoke of the calmness they felt while observing these displays, as though the very essence of the project carried an atmosphere of quiet inspiration. Dr. Elias Maxwell, who lived long enough to witness this renewed appreciation, spent his later years reflecting upon the experiment with deep gratitude. He would sometimes speak to students about the importance of curiosity and gentleness in scientific exploration. To him, the car had been a companion on a journey of understanding, a reminder that great ideas need not be loud or forceful to make lasting impressions. In interviews, he would express hope that future thinkers would approach their work with the same sense of balance that had guided the experiment from the beginning. When he eventually passed, the scientific community honored him not with grand ceremonies, but with moments of contemplation, remembering the man who believed that progress could be both innovative and peaceful. His legacy lived on through his writings, his teachings, and the quiet wonder inspired by the decade-long journey of the remarkable car. In the years that followed, Maxwell's story continued to encourage thoughtful creativity. New technologies were developed with the guiding idea that harmony and endurance could be achieved through mindful design. Engineers found inspiration in the serene equilibrium of the original machine, and educators introduced Maxwell's principles as examples of how science can reflect the gentle rhythms of nature. And so the experiment, though long completed, never truly ended. It lived on in every project shaped by balance, in every young thinker encouraged by its quiet brilliance, and in every dream that sought not just to advance technology, but understand the delicate beauty of how all things move and sustain themselves. Thus, the story of Maxwell's car reached its peaceful conclusion, not with dramatic revelation, but with a lasting influence that shaped minds, inspired hearts, and gently reminded the world that innovation, at its best, can be as calm and continuous as the soft turning of a wheel on an endless track.